What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of National Pastime, the first episode that we will be doing on camera. So we're real. We exist in the real world here. Toaster's got his fancy Patriot smoking jacket on, but yeah. So welcome to the show. We've got a good one here for you. We're recording this on July 1st, and tomorrow is the COVID opt-out deadline for the 2021 season. We'll get into what that means potentially for Aaron Rodgers and anybody else within the league. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers' current teammate, Davante Adams, and his love affair with the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback, Derek Carr, former college teammates. Won't they end up being teammates again at some point? And then we get into a list of NFL head coaches that we see as having a make or break year going into this season. I also have an apology that I want to make to Browns Nation, the Dog Pound. But anything else before we get going, Toaster?
Wait, is COVID opting out or the players opting out? Because if COVID was opting out, that would be awesome.
Yeah, how didn't we get that memo last year? That would have been nice. I would have taken that opt out for sure,
I would have put my good shirt on.
or any shirt on, frankly. All right, let's get into it. All right, Toaster. So we are recording this on July 1st. July 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is the official COVID opt-out date for the 2021 season. So essentially, they're carrying over what they did last year to some degree. Players that are deemed high risk can get up to a 350, or I don't know if it's even up to, it's probably just a flat $350,000 stipend, I would assume there. And voluntary opt-outs do not get paid anything, although they did get 150,000 last year. So at least from a baseline standpoint, they can't recoup money that way. And rookies are disqualified because you have to have been under contract as of October of last year. So the brings us to, I guess, the number one guy that we're looking at potentially here is Aaron Rodgers, just because of his situation in Green Bay. And is he going to hold out? Is he going to retire? This is another bullet in the chamber essentially for him, although I think neither of
Another
us.
bullet in the news media
Yeah.
24/7 cycle. Something else to talk about, and I guess we fell into that very Russian roulette here.
Yeah.
I think it's a non-starter for him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, we can maybe dive into some of the other details here as we go, but the biggest thing for me that stands out is if he does opt out, so he will make $6.8 million. He will still receive his roster bonus, but the Packers will receive up to almost $31 million in salary cap space. And I think if he is not going to play for the Packers this year, the last thing that he wants is, if he's not going to be on another team anyway, the last thing he wants is to give them some cap relief, especially with how bad their 2022 cap situation looks. So I agree. I don't think he's going that route.
He ruins all leverage that he has right now because the opt-out, if he says by 4 p.m. tomorrow, 4 p.m. July 2nd, depending on when you're listening to this, depending on when you're re-listening to this, go ahead and listen multiple times. He's done for the season. There is
Yeah.
no negotiation. There is no more drama. There is no Aaron Rodgers in the media. He basically goes away like Danica Patrick did, and you never hear of him again, right? Until some next news media cycle is available. And that's the exact opposite of what Rodgers been
What he
doing
wants.
on this scorched earth routine that he's got going on right now, right? He wants his name in the media as often as he can. And the July 6th tournament that he's got going on with Tom Brady, Phil Mickelson, and Bryson DeChambeau is not worth anything because people are there because of Aaron Rodgers and the drama behind him, not because,
Yeah.
oh, look, we have some practically retired quarterback that's playing with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time with some douchebag and Bryson DeChambeau. Oh, sorry, I got those backwards.
Yeah. Especially Bryson's caddy probably agrees with you, especially after today for sure. Yeah, I agree. It's like Aaron wants to make this thing as big as possible. He still wants to play, I would imagine, this year. And even if he ends up, his holdout ends up taking him into the season and missing games, right? At least that's a decision that he can change later if ultimately he wants to. The opt out removes that option from him.
If
So,
he wants to change it or if the Packers want to change it, because this
right.
could be very similar to when Carson Palmer forced his hand and said, "I'm retired. I'm not playing." And then middle of the season rolls around and they're like, "Well, you're clearly not worth anything to us right now." Carson was a little different in that his value was actually probably declining the longer that he didn't play. I think Aaron Rodgers will stay at least stable.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a week 6, week 8 trade for Aaron Rodgers is gonna be something that he would say no to. I think he would embrace that, and that's something that he would like out of his holdout, quite frankly, because there's no reason for him to sit out an entire year. The only reason it makes sense to sit out entire years for the Packers because they're not getting draft capital. They're
Right.
probably not getting somebody that's going to be a game changer to get them into the Super Bowl because you lost your starting quarterback. No matter what star defensive player you get back in return, that's not gonna tip the scale in their favor.
Yeah.
So it makes the most sense for him to be available for trade. Should the Packers finally come around and say that's the only route that we have, might as well just get something for him this year.
Yeah. And the only real reason I could see him taking it is if the Packers have straight up said, look, we are not budging on this, we are not trading you. So sit down if you want for 2021, but you are going to be a Green Bay Packer. The only reason I could see him doing it is because of the 6.8 million that he would make versus the nothing that he would make
Well,
by
he
holding out.
He's technically already made that 6.8
Right.
by being on the roster, and another thing to keep clear in all of this is that the NFL and the NFLPA look at those roster bonuses and those prorated bonuses very differently. How the NFLPA looks at those bonuses is money paid is money earned. The proration is only for salary cap purposes. It's like buying a house and saying, okay, well, you're going to owe us this much interest down the road. And you say, well, what if I'm going to sell that? What if I sell the house early? Like, well, you don't owe that interest anymore, right? You still get all the equity that you've earned. You still get all the money that you've put into it. You just no longer, quote unquote, owe the bank that extra money that you promised
Right.
to pay them. And so the NFL will come back after them and say, well, we paid this to you all in advance, no, with the expectation that you would play over this extended period of time. And the NFLPA looks at it as you paid him this much money up front for him to sign because he wasn't going to sign this contract if he wasn't getting his money up front. If you wanted him to have some sort of, extra incentive down the road, that should have been in his base salary. That's what base salaries are for. The bonus is to get him to sign. That is his money, whether or not he plays one day or 5 years. And it's the exact same thing that Andrew Luck went through, right? No, the Colts didn't come after him for any of his money. And this would actually be a pretty good case study down the road if this actually went to arbitration, if he does hold out and they're forced to pursue that money because obviously the Colts wanted Andrew Luck to be in good standing, whereas I think the
Yeah.
Packers are kind of past that point in their relationship.
Yeah. It, I think that would be very interesting to see if they think they can mend the relationship if ultimately they decided not to go after the money. But I mean, how do you think that would play out? I would tend to think that it would work out in the Packers' favor, at least to some degree.
It hasn't been litigated yet, and litigation is settled on precedents typically. And when there is no precedent, it can go either way. But I think the NFLPA actually has a pretty strong argument that this is money that was paid. Yes, there was a contract that was expected to be fulfilled, but the bonus is the bonus. If you're on the roster that day, you get your bonus. That bonus doesn't say I'm playing 17 games because guess what? You get injured on day 3 of the new league year. You're still on the roster, but
Right.
you're not going to play any of those games. And so there's a lot of arguments that can be made that say you're entitled to this money and that was the risk that the employer put out there by giving it to you all up front without any contingencies in response.
Yeah, and I can see Rodgers almost wanting to
Wanting,
go Yeah, and just take it to court and just like twist the knife as much as possible. And at the end of the day, I think the point I was getting to there was that I don't think 6.8 million is enough to move the needle for him. If he's willing to forgo 20 whatever $1 million, he's willing to forgo 30 plus $1 million, I think, if ultimately it gets him what he wants. So yeah, he's probably the biggest name that we're looking at for tomorrow, but I can't imagine he ends up utilizing that.
Yeah. The other interesting aspect to this is the tolling of his contract if he does ultimately hold out, because that may be an
Opt
incentive.
out, right?
No, no, hold out. So yes, his contract will toll if he opts out, but if he holds out as well, then he still has 3 years of his basically contract remaining for that new team. So it's again something that makes it harder for
Oh,
another team to come in and negotiate because he's under contract for 3 years rather than if they trade him at the mid-season point, then he's only going to have 2.5 years under contract.
yeah.
And he's just that much further away from his next earning potential. So there's a lot of caveats here. I think Aaron Rodgers is the type of guy that wants to see how the cards fall and test the waters and potentially just keep his name in the media as long as possible.
God, poor Jordan Love, right? Like he didn't ask for any of the shit, and he is just
Poor
smack
Jordan
dab in the
Love,
middle.
poor Blake Bortles. Who do you think's the starting quarterback's going to be?
Yeah, you are right. You are right. But whether Blake start actually, if Blake does start, that's probably worse for Jordan. And again, he didn't ask for any of it, but yeah, unfortunately for him,
They've got a one-time Super Bowl champion on the roster and a one-time AFC finalist in the roster. So why would they switch to Jordan Love? I mean, Philadelphia was apparently a QB factory, but to me it looks like Green Bay is in the running.
yeah, sorry, kid. Um, how fucking funny would it be though for Blake Bortles to start over this kid who was a first round pick just last year? I mean,
That destroyed the franchise by being a first round pick.
yeah,
Yeah, we wish no ill will on anybody in this league,
no,
quite frankly, but in just to save face, I think that the Packers have to go with Love, regardless of
oh yeah,
how the quarterback competition plays out. But they're obviously hoping that Rodgers comes back. I don't think that it means enough to him. I think he can sit out a year, or at least sit out 6 8 weeks, and then if you have a Broncos team that's 4-4 and within a playoff push, then they might be throwing some extra capital your way past the first, three number one draft picks that they're going to have, or three first round draft picks that they're going to have to give up. They may be desperate and say, this is our opportunity right now. Let's take the shot, because if we go one more season, then that's just one more season, one less season we get out of Aaron Rodgers.
what God, I just wish we could sim these next like 3 to 4 weeks and just get to training camp and just see what goes down because this is going to be awesome. I'm with you. I think he is just ready to watch the shit burn. So, all right. Any last points on the opt out? I really don't think there's any other players that strike me as worth talking about.
No, and that's again, I think why this has been a little bit contrived in the media is this is the only story about the opt-outs that there could ultimately be. I think all of the high risk players made it very clear, not even early this year, but even at the end of last year, that they wanted to be back in the league. Football is just so unique in that your time frame to earn money is so
Yeah.
limited. It's so many positions that the only people that really can opt out are quarterbacks. I mean, you've said yourself, never give a running back a second contract, right? So that right there limits your contract to what should be 4 years, 5 years in the case of the Steelers and Jaguars because they made terrible decisions. But like your earning potential is so short, you can't spend that on the bench. And that again, this $350,000 stipend that we're talking about is not a it's not a front, is not an extra money. This is $350,000 of what you're intended to earn in that year,
Yeah.
paid in advance with the expectation that you'll play the next year.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you are high risk and your livelihood depends on playing and making this money and everything, I would assume you're getting vaccinated, and you're probably attempting to make your life a little easier that way. So yeah, we'll see, I guess, come tomorrow afternoon, but I'm not anticipating any big names.
No,
So
I don't think so either. And I think, and based on how last year went, if you were going to opt out, it happened decently early in the process. It wasn't like a trade deadline where there's a bunch of movement at the very end of the day. It's
right.
this is my decision.
Yeah, you're not. I mean, you've had plenty of time to think about it, right? You're not
Yep.
gonna go, I don't know, well beyond that. So yeah, we'll see. I guess somewhat tied to Rodgers here is Davante Adams, and he's looking for a new deal, and that, the Rodgers decision ultimately is going to play a part in that as well. I think Davante's been pretty candid about saying that if Rodgers is there, he would like to play there. He would like to re-sign with the Packers, but if he's not, he's open to looking, right? And I think that's what pried the
And
door open a little bit for
why
Derek.
wouldn't you be, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're looking to be on a contender, and I don't think anybody's under the impression that the Green Bay Packers maintain their I'm not going to call it a stronghold because there has been some back and forth over the years, but their pre-ranking is number one in the
yeah,
NFC North year after year without Rodgers on the team.
yeah. And uh, Adams wants to get paid. He wants to be one of the highest paid receivers in the league. And the Packers have a really tough 2022 financial situation. Now, granted, with a big extension, you could backload that stuff and still make it work. But I just don't
But
know, is it worth
they're
it to
already
them?
30 million over the cap without Adams on the roster.
Right, right. So,
The easiest way to make room for him is to not have Rodgers on the roster, but that almost guarantees you that you don't have Adams on the roster short of a franchise tag situation, which quite frankly just worked out pretty well for the Bears. But I don't see that same scenario working out for the Packers, considering they think that they already have their heir apparent on the roster, and people are not in a consensus agreement that that's actually the case.
yeah. So that's opened the door for Derek Carr, his former Fresno State teammate, and from what I can gather, best bud, to essentially be in the media saying that he's going to recruit, assuming Davante doesn't sign an extension and plays out the year in Green Bay and becomes a free agent, he's going to recruit super hard. Now, that put Davante in a tough spot, and Davante was asked about the situation, and he said it would be a dream to play with Derek, but he's a Packer right now, and quote unquote, we'll see what happens. So obviously, the Rodgers situation, I think, is the main piece of that last sentence there. But I mean, what do you make of this situation? Do you think it's realistic that would the Raiders swing a trade for Davante Adams here prior to the season, even?
I don't think that they would swing a trade. I think that they're anticipating him becoming a free agent. That's really the only way that they're going to be able to get him. But Gruden's already shown, should he still be the coach next year, that he's all in on trying to find receivers. He drafted two years ago. Actually, I think he drafted three 2 years ago, and he drafted another couple this year. He is just trying to find somebody to be a downfield threat for Derek Carr. And right
Like
now,
Amari
that
Cooper?
yeah, well, he also likes to get rid of a lot of talent too. I don't know if you've seen what they've done with their O line, but no, the Henry Ruggs, right? He's trying to do everything he can to establish a dominant offense, and it's much easier to evaluate talent once it's already in the league. I think Bill Belichick is the epitome of that, but Mike Mayock might be the new epitome of that, considering his draft board looks very different as an actual GM than it did when he was a analyst for the draft.
Yeah. Well, and there's no question, right? Davante Adams is on the short list for best receiver in the league. He's probably top five without question. And yeah, I mean, it would be a no-brainer, especially with the way that Derek Carr started to push the ball down the field a little bit more last year. And hopefully they open that offense up a little bit more for him. Who knows? If they added Davante Adams, I would hope that Jon Gruden would do that. But it's an interesting situation. ultimately it feels like with most situations in the league right now, we're waiting to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers still, right? It's like the Broncos are hung up on that to some degree. And even the Raiders, right, are a possible destination potentially. I think they're probably sticking with Derek Carr, but if an offer presents itself and Carr is what's necessary to get it done, maybe Jon Gruden pulls that trigger. Who knows?
I
But
honestly think it's more likely that Rodgers and Adams reunite on the Las Vegas Raiders than they do in Green Bay.
Green Bay,
Yeah.
ooh, that is spicy.
Well,
I
because
like that.
so obviously the Broncos are the team that's been basically earmarked for an Aaron Rodgers trade. And how do you let Aaron Rodgers into your division without making a competitive offer?
Oh yeah, you have to give him like a Godfather offer. Like,
And Derek Carr is a better return if you don't truly believe that love is your answer to being competitive
oh yeah,
than Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. So I don't think that you can just sit idle and let Aaron Rodgers just go to Denver if you're the Raiders. And with that being said, they have better opportunities, and Adams might be on the Raiders next year instead of the Packers, and it's just down south and running loose in Vegas.
oof, boy. The difference between Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Las Vegas, Nevada, that's quite the upgrade. If that's ultimately what Davante ends up doing, I'd sign me up for that.
Yeah,
So you touched on it, or maybe hinted at it slightly there, but Jon Gruden, you said if he is with the Raiders next year, um, is that hinting that maybe he's on the hot seat? And do you think that he's truly on the hot seat, or is this
am,
just
am I just
speculation?
spewing nonsense? No,
Yeah.
I think he has to be on the hot seat. He he's had a 396 win percentage in his first 3 years in Oakland and Las Vegas. He's never won more than 8 games with this team. He has incrementally increased. He's gone from fourth, third to second, and then potentially first in the AFC West. But if you have somebody that has not gotten you to above 500 in 4 years, what are you hanging on to? Because it's not a dearth of talent around him, right? Or if it is a dearth of talent, then you have bigger issues than your head coach.
Well, he's shipped off most of that high end talent, and he's done nothing with the return. I mean, that the Khalil Mack decision, that was his. The Amari Cooper decision, that was his. And maybe the drafting has been a collaboration with Mike Mayock to some degree, but ultimately he is the end all be all decision maker from a football ops standpoint for them. So, yeah, he's done an awful job with this team. I don't think there's any question, if you look at the majority of the coaches in the league with the track record that he's had over the last few years and what he's done as a team manager, that they would be on the hot seat. I just think he signed that 10-year, $100 million deal. I think the Raiders and the Davis family is somewhat enamored with John, and like he's a big name and he's a big personality, and he
It's
seems
so
to.
football, right? You're living in the past. You're like, he won a Super Bowl in
Yeah.
2002. I've got a Super Bowl winning head coach leading my, brand new shiny thing in Las Vegas. Yet he's failed to put even a single butt in a seat in that new stadium.
Oh, those are facts. Those are straight facts.
Fact.
Yeah. I can't really buy it. I don't know. I just again, I think in any situation, in most other situations, he absolutely should be, and he may have already been gone.
So are you
But
letting him develop a new quarterback? Like, are you sticking with Derek Carr if they go under 500 once again?
me, no. But the Raiders, I think yes. I think they're going to let him play out that 10-year deal, and because if he walks, he's owed all that money. So you're paying him the remainder of that contract plus another coach to come in and an entire new coaching staff to come in and coach. I don't think they're going to do that. I
This
mean, they
this
just
is this is monopoly money. It's not real to the people that have this amount of money. How many buyouts do you see in college football, right? You're just throwing money at a lost cause because you say this was a bad decision. Why that contract was ever signed in the first place, I don't quite understand. There's been very few coaches that have had successful 10 years straight tenures in the league.
yeah.
That I will give you is very Raiders. But you bite it, you move on, and there's so many other coaches in the league that can take you to that next level that you take another shot.
But they just spent how much money to build that brand new stadium, and I know they weren't on the hook for the entirety of it, but hundreds of millions of dollars out of that family's pocket, and they didn't have like you mentioned, not a single butt in the seats last year. Well, I mean, we were talking earlier in the year with the way they were shedding offensive linemen. That are they like cash poor? Can they not like afford to do some of these things right now? Salary cap aside, like just pure money. I don't
And
when
we think that that's not true considering Mark Davis is now spending 700,000 or
Yes,
$700,000 to revamp his suite because it wasn't done appropriately at the time. So if you're basically spending $1 million on your
yeah,
vacation house for 4 hours every 8 or for 8 Sundays a year, then I think that you don't have a cash flow problem. And in
you're
Vegas,
probably
I
right.
think I think that they see that that's going to be a money pit regardless. That stadium is beautiful. There's tourists in and out. Nothing's going to be better than that show. And I think, not to deflect from football, but the Golden Knights have shown that that is a spectacle to go to a hockey game in Vegas. And I think you're going to get that same exact environment, if not more so,
Mm,
in that new stadium.
I think you will because it's the NFL. But I think what makes T-Mobile Arena and the night special is that they're on the strip. So you're literally walking by it. You can, play some blackjack, have some drinks, and then carry a drink up to the front doors of T-Mobile Arena. You're not going to be able to do that with Allegiant necessarily, but yeah, they may not be as cash poor as we thought a few months ago, based on Mark Davis's suite upgrade.
Just
But
put it on the
you
Amex.
also, yeah, put it on the black card. But you also don't, you mentioned college coaches and buyouts. Generally, when those happen, you have a very rich donor that comes in and says, "Fuck this guy. He's fucking up my team. I want him out of here. Here's a check for $20 million. Make him go away."
So
You
like a
don't
guy that owns a $4 billion franchise.
Yeah, who we're talking about has just had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't think he wants to do that necessarily to make Jon Gruden go away. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Maybe it's not this year, but I think another sub 500 year. Definitely not an in season firing. I can't picture that. But at the end
yeah,
of the year, if they're cutting bait with Derek Carr, if there's no reason not to cut bait with Jon Gruden too.
yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe John. eh, I don't know. Mark seems like enamored with John to some degree, and John
His
might be able to convince him
his
of
face is
anything he
just
wants.
stuck like that. I don't think there's no emotion there.
Dude, he loves being part of like the boys club. He's got that stupid haircut. There's no other scenario in life outside of him being a billionaire where he'd be able to hang out with, a celebrity and an NFL head coach and all this shit. Like he loves that. He loves that. I
You
don't
don't
think
have to
John's
go there, but you could be president of the United States and get that same outlook.
yeah. Yeah, for real. Oh, we got to witness that firsthand. Uh okay, so Gruden, yeah, we'll see what happens. If they have a bad year this year, maybe next year. I think we're talking hot seat a little bit, but it's got to be bad this year. I think he's going to be there for. I mean, if I had to put my money down, I bet he plays out the whole 10 years. But worst case scenario, he's probably getting at least 8, to where the buyout is like 20 mil or something, and it's a little easier to write off. But so Gruden aside, there's a few other
So
coaches.
if you already don't like my pick for Gruden, then you're probably going to hate my pick for Carroll, right?
No, I can buy into that. So I'll let you give your take on why you think Pete's on the hot seat. But I actually agree to some degree there.
Pete Carroll has not had a losing season since 2012 with the Seattle Seahawks. So
Well, Russell Wilson.
not a typical coach on the hot seat situation. But what he
Yeah,
hasn't been able to do is perform in the playoffs. They've lost in the wild card game 2 of the 3 last years, and then once in the divisional game, then failed to make the playoffs even a year before that. And so they haven't been overly competitive since losing that Super Bowl to the New England Patriots on what was supposed to be the establishment of,
a
or the
dynasty.
establishment of Russell Wilson as a dynastic Tom Brady type quarterback, and wanting to put the game in his hands rather than take the sure thing and give that ball to Marshawn Lynch. And what I think that's done is caused about 6-7 years of resentment with his what was supposed to be franchise QB. And there's going to be a choice between the two of them, I believe, after an early playoff exit this year. I think that they're still competitive. I mean, assuming they make the playoffs, this is the NFC. The NFC West is the most
Tough
competitive
division.
division. You could win 10 games easily and not make the playoffs, even with that extra playoff team. But I just think that there's so much talent in that division and that conference that Seattle's not going to be able to go above and beyond and make it to, the conference championship, the Super Bowl. And that means choices need to be made, because ultimately we're here to win the Super Bowl. We're not here to play as many games as we can, slap hands and say, good job. If it's been 8 years, 9 years since you've returned to the Super Bowl, we need a change. And I pick Russell Wilson over Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked at length about how we think the Russ situation, they did what they needed to, said what they needed to say to get the team ready to play going into this season. But ultimately, there's going to be another reckoning. There's going to be a reckoning at some point, right? It just feels like there's something there they can't fix, and barring an unexpected run to the Super Bowl, right? So I agree with you. I dead on. The reason that Pete's on the hot seat is because another non-Super Bowl year, or maybe even non-playoff year this year, and Russ is going to really crank up the heat. And if the Seahawks are smart, Pete Carroll's 69 years old. Okay, he's going to be 70 years old in the middle of the season.
You
He's
want to get him off your health care before that jaw surgery kicks in.
yeah, yeah, or at least get him a different kind of chewing gum. But he's how long do you really think he's going to continue to coach? And if you're Seattle and it's become Russ comes to you and says, "Look, it's a him or me thing," I'd be like, "Okay, well, at max, we're getting 2, 3 more years out of Pete anyway. So cut bait now and move forward." I'm with you. I mean, he probably has as much riding on a deep playoff run as any coach in the league, and it's because of the way that the Russell Wilson situation's unfolded, and the fact that, I mean, luckily for them, they were able to smooth it over. They didn't have to make any drastic moves this year, but
Well,
it
you
it
can say they
really
smoothed it over, but it was going to be prohibitive almost to move on, and that narrative changes next year, where they can actually th- this year they had to pay to get rid of him. Next
right.
year they'll actually get some cap relief out of it. So I think Russ potentially understanding that and seeing the writing on the wall that, like, this just is not feasible for us right now, changes your vigor of going after that, right? Especially when he still has a lot of money to make in his career potentially. He wasn't in a holdout situation. He's not viewed at that same tier as Aaron Rodgers is, where he's
Right.
basically infallible and his value is going to maintain. So he needed to play this year. And because of that, he knew he needed to play for the Seahawks, and next year will be a new story.
Yeah. And the Seahawks, as I'm sure you remember, are also without a first round pick next year because of the Jamal Adams deal. So if you do move on from Russ, you're gonna need, if the writing's on the wall, you're gonna need to be making that move, getting as much draft capital as you can, and you don't have a viable backup option, right? Like you've got a decent team, but Russ is really carrying the load there. You're not going to find an easy replacement as of right now, unless something falls in their lap. And you never know, it could, but I wouldn't bank on like a Justin Fields Bears situation where you get lucky somehow and some guy falls and you're able to move up. They just don't have.
Yeah, and that conference or that division's not going to get easier either. So
Right.
you're still going to have Stafford there. You're still going to have Garoppolo, Lance, whatever you want to call him, and Murray's not going away. Kliff Kingsbury might be, but Murray's not going anywhere.
Yeah. So if you're ready to move on from Pete, I was going to stay in the division here and talk about Kliff a little bit. Kliff to me is the most obvious candidate to basically, like, he's playing 100% for his job this year because they have a
And he
young
is
dynamic.
playing. He was drafted by the quarterbacks. He is playing, or he's drafted by the Patriots. He is playing quarterback this year if Kyler Murray gets hurt. He is literally playing for his job.
Yeah. Well, actually, Matt Nagy tried that a few years ago, and the league shut that down. So I don't think you're allowed to do that, actually. But
yeah, I think the Broncos would have tried that last year. Actually, they did want to try that last year and play their position coach over poor Hinton.
Yep. But the league shut it down. So sorry, Kliff, you're not getting in. But so yeah, he's coaching for his job this season. They have an established young quarterback, and we obviously, I think, are collectively pretty low on Kyler compared to a lot of people. But at the end of the day, he is a dynamic player. He has the potential to elevate a team if he can, start to do some of the things from the pocket that we haven't seen from him yet. And with that, I think comes a lot of pressure. And Kingsbury is, we've said, they're in a very tough division. I mean, there's a chance that they, I don't know, win 6 games this year. And not to say that their team isn't good, but it's like you're going up against the Rams, the Niners, and
Seahawks.
Seahawks. Yeah, you're going up against the Rams, the Niners, and the Seahawks for 6 games. And I mean, those 3 teams could win 10 plus games. And you could be sitting there, even if you have a great year, quote unquote great year, you could be sitting there missing the playoffs. And I don't think the Cardinals can afford to continue to push forward with Kliff. I mean, his offense just hasn't been, I think, what they expected of it. He hasn't been dynamic enough, I think, in his different personnel groupings. In a lot of his play callings, I mean, it's a lot of very standard air raid stuff, and
Yeah, it's street ball. It's let's get 4 wideouts out there and run.
Well, and it's a lot of just standard like hitches and things, and he's not dynamic ultimately. I think they thought, okay, he's this bright young guy, and maybe he'd be creative a little bit, and he just really hasn't been. And he's had talent. And Kyler is a guy that you can be very creative with. And
He can even play baseball. Like if
he
you
can play
wanted to,
baseball.
that might be a better route for Kingsbury if he wanted to actually coach a winning team. I want to point out Kingsbury came into this league from Texas Tech as their head coach. Their 3 seasons preceding him becoming the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. 5-7, 6-7, 5-7. What the fuck? Why was he selected as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals? This wasn't a draft process. This wasn't, oh shit, he fell to us. This was a pointed decision to say that he is a young, up and coming individual that's going to just change our franchise. And I mean, in good news, He won as many games in 2018 with Texas Tech, with the Raiders, and as he did 2019 with the Cardinals. He also played, 3 more games with the Cardinals. But what the fuck? Why is he even here? You've had 2 seasons. He still hasn't had a 500 record. He hasn't had a 500 record since 2015, and I want to say that was with Patrick Mahomes. 2013 was Baker Mayfield, right? Like, so he's coached elite quarterbacks well. And when I say well, he hasn't had less than 5 losses in a season, including college, in his entire head coaching career.
He he's like part of this young group of head coaches now, offensive coaches, that it feels like it's sexy, right? And it's like, well, and he's obviously quite sexy himself, and I think that plays a part. But it's like we've gone for years, right? The NFL was just banging its head against the wall. Let's get these tough, defensive-minded coaches and disciplinarians, all this stuff, and then all of a sudden we flip the switch because of a couple examples like Sean McVay, and we're like, oh well, shit. I guess like really in today's NFL, it's like you need an offensive-minded coach and blah blah blah. And we've just steered way too far in that direction. And now there has been some more cases recently where it's worked out. You look at Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, but how much of that is Aaron Rodgers, right?
Exactly, and, like, that's what Chip Kelly was the ultimate example, right? And Chip Kelly had a great first year, and then you figured these guys out because guess what? This isn't college where you are having new talent year after year after year. You've got to recycle your rosters. The game film from the year before doesn't mean anything. Now it's a system, and when you've got established people doing this and their job is dedicated to film review, not just at the coaching level, but also at the player level, it's a lot easier to figure out. So I think that he was Sean McVay again is a good point of somebody that came into the league and boom, I think he's still going to be successful, but his offenses have been nowhere near where they were his first couple of years in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think McVay does a good enough job, and I think he's been maybe handcuffed a bit by Jared Goff. So we're going to get to really see what he can do this year with Matt Stafford. But I still think McVay does a pretty good job of mixing things up enough. And I mean, he ran the same personnel grouping like 75% of the time, and just had enough variations of play calls and routes out of that formation to confuse defenses enough to still be successful. I just don't see Kingsbury as having that level of creativity necessarily. And he's had a few years to show us. Like you would think, okay, after year one or your first year with Kyler, right? It's like, okay, well now let's take this thing to the next level. And Kyler took a bit of a step last year, but it didn't seem like Kliff did. So
Well, and we're giving him credit for an 8-8 season, but he also beat the Seahawks in overtime on a terrible interception by Russell Wilson. He won on the Hail Murray, and
yep.
barely beat the Eagles by a touchdown. And so, how much credit are we actually supposed to be giving him here? If you start off the season, what was it, like 6-3, and then finish up 5-2, or
Yeah.
2-5, right?
Yeah.
Like that to me rings of poor coaching, not poor talent, because the talent doesn't change from week 1 to week 17 considerably, but the opponents and the coaching has a lot more variability.
Yep, for sure. So we'll see what happens. At least for Kliff, if he does bomb and he's out of a job, he's got that sick pad in Paradise Valley, and hopefully he holds on to that because that place is going to be a gold mine.
He didn't just rent that like McVay did for the draft?
I don't think so.
No,
Maybe he did though. Maybe he did.
wasn't the Rocket Mortgage fireplace.
Yeah. Jesus. So I've got one more coach that I want to talk about here, only because I think the general perception is that Matt Nagy is on the hot seat and needs to play Justin Fields early, because if he doesn't, then and the Bears don't do well this year, he's out of a job. I could not disagree with that more. I think purely the selection of Justin Fields has bought him and Ryan Pace 2 to 3 more years easy. I don't think 2021 matters at all so long as they don't completely break Justin Fields in the process. What do you think?
I think that you're treating this just like the Mark Davis situation, that the McCaskies are in love with Nagy and he's infallible. No, I don't think I have to go quite that far, but I understand what you're saying, that they're going to give him a chance to develop. But he also had that chance already with a young QB, and it did not go well. And I don't understand. I haven't seen enough out of his. If he's resuming play calling duties, then that's probably the RIP to his career, because when he was calling plays, they were predictable and, quite frankly, not effective. It wasn't until he gave up play calling duties that there was a rebirth to that Bears offense last year. And then he resumed play calling duties at the end of the year, and they went right back to their typical, predictable, non productive game planning. So I will give it to you that he can buy some time as a head coach, but I don't think he can buy some time as a play caller.
So I think some of that is overblown and missing some context. One, I think the development of Mitch, I'm not so sure there was anything he could have done there. And he wasn't part of the selection of Mitch, which he was with Justin, and I think that's significant. He handpicked somebody that he thinks can run his offense. Mitch showed, his 2018 was good, but like we've just talked about, it's how do you continue to progress, right? When the league starts to figure you out a little bit. And Mitch never showed an ability to take the next step in that offense. And there was a lot of times over the last couple of years where it was painfully obvious that the reason the play calling was so predictable was because it was all that Mitch could handle. And there were a lot of examples as well where Mitch would go to the line with a play that he could check into, or maybe even check into a run, and was making the wrong decisions constantly. I mean, even stuff as simple as RPOs, right? You're reading one guy basically. Mitch was making the wrong reads on these things all the time, and Nagy did his best, in my opinion, to not just completely trash Mitch for as long as he could, and then it reached a breaking point and he couldn't do it anymore, and it was obvious that he couldn't run the offense he wanted. Now, where I guess you would fault him is he essentially handpicked Nick Foles, right, as his guy that he thought could run the offense, and Foles was awful last year. I mean, they had that comeback in Atlanta, but outside of that, I mean, Foles was probably worse than Mitch. Now, when he gave up the play calling duties, they dialed back the offense significantly and basically were running a variation of the same 5 plays that, yeah, they fit Mitch's strengths, but it caught up to them. And the Green Bay game was a disaster. And it really was like, once you saw enough tape, right, of the offense that they were running with Bill Lazor calling the plays, it was all these play action boots, very half field reads, simple half field route concepts. You were able to shut that down. And when Nagy came back as a play caller, he tried to maintain some of that stuff because Mitch was comfortable with it. But at some point, you have to be able to do something else. You have to be able to open it up, and he wasn't able to do that with Mitch. So I
was really just throwing you under the bus there because of the people that thought there was a Mitch revival that happened under Bill Lazor, but they also played the Texans, the Vikings, and the Jaguars during that tremendous 3-game winning streak that they had to close out the year and clinch a playoff berth and what would become Mitch Trubisky MVP performance. No, that was really just giving you the bait on that one. But I believe
Fair.
that Nagy is on the hot seat. I know that there is some politics in the background. We don't know how long Ryan Pace's contract is. Yeah. We don't know how long Matt Nagy's contract is for. So I can see them getting a little bit more leeway with with the Justin Fields pick, but I still think that they need to play him right away. And I still contend that if he's not the starting quarterback by week 2, and I think it would be a mistake not to make him the quarterback week 1, that there's going to be some answers that need to happen in that locker room. But ultimately, he may not have a boss at that point. So he might buy himself time right there during the ownership transition of the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the McCaskies are there, the McCaskies love Ryan Pace, and Ryan Pace loves Matt Nagy, and they very much seem to believe in what they can do with the right quarterback in place. And now that they have someone that seemingly gives them that hope, I can't see a scenario where they don't let Nagy try to develop Justin Fields a little bit, because what Justin does well are the things that Matt Nagy wants to do as a play caller, and he hasn't been able to do that with Mitch because Mitch can't throw the ball accurately further than 12 yards down the field. So I just think ultimately
depends on what his target is. If he's throwing for open grass, he hits it every time.
Yeah, you're right.
Who's generating these stats, right? You can manipulate stats however you want. Is it a receiver he's supposed to throw to?
Yeah, we don't know the play call. You don't know the play call. You don't know the intent. Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's been really overblown. And I think it becomes an easy talking point for a lot of NFL media because it's the Bears. It's the third largest media market in the country. And you're talking about a coach on the hot seat, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we can talk about this for a little bit. I don't think that's the reality. I mean, I think if let's say worst case scenario here, Justin Fields doesn't play a down in this season, and the team goes like 5-12 with Andy, which was, God, I was trying to do that math in my head. That was really hard. The 17 game season's fucking me up still. But let's say they go 5-12 with Andy Dalton. But at the end of the day, Matt goes to management and says, look, Justin wasn't ready. We don't think Justin was ready. I think that still gives them a pass. I still think they would be like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Well, we saw how it worked with Patrick Mahomes sitting the whole year and blah, blah, blah. They like to play that card every chance they get. I don't see it happening personally.
Yeah, sat with the team that was going to the Super Bowl. I can't see that happening. I have Fields ranked 15 players higher on my list than you do for Dalton. So to me, I would look at that as a management decision. Just say, Toaster called this. We knew who the starter was. Get the fuck out of here. And maybe let's get some fresh blood, some fresh podcasts, some fresh insight in here.
That's right. Hey, call us up. Let's go.
I don't even need to move to Chicago. I can move to the suburbs, wherever you guys want to play next. I'm good.
Hey, man, Arlington. I hear it's beautiful in the fall. So let's do it. Anybody else that sticks out to you? Coaches that are kind of in a make or break year?
One that sticks out is McCarthy to me, for two reasons. One, his size. But secondly, I don't have any confidence in his coaching abilities whatsoever. I think that he was somebody that fell into an Aaron Rodgers situation and was able to win one Super Bowl in 8 years with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying that, Rodgers has won Super Bowls without him at this point, but he took 1 year off and then took Dallas to quite frankly, an uninspiring 6-10 performance last year. Yes, Dak Prescott got hurt, but yes, there were also some of those wins that they probably did not deserve to win. They beat the Falcons on that awful onside kick. There were multiple games where they were coming back from behind, and when McCarthy has to manage games, that's been his downfall for his entire career. So again, why are you putting... Go ahead.
When the guy that's paid to manage the games has to manage the games, that's been his downfall.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but know your strengths, right? Didn't the Ravens get a statistics guru to basically tell them when to call timeouts and when not to? And I don't see that innovation from McCarthy. And I don't think that he, quite frankly, understands it. To me, this is a Chargers situation all over again. The Chargers had a loaded roster, and we're being held back by as much as I like Lynn, respect him, think he's going to do great things as a coordinator in this league. He just was not cut out for that position. And I think McCarthy was bolstered by Rodgers, and now his shortcomings will be apparent when he doesn't have that same level of basically leadership. Not a knock on Dak on that one, despite my rankings, but just Aaron Rodgers is again another tier, another 3 tiers in my rankings above him.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do basically nothing with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, and you can roll out a successful offense. And you do put enough pieces in place, especially in that division, right? Like that's the other big thing here. We're talking about the Lions. Okay, now granted, Stafford was there for a while, but we know how bad that team's been. The Bears, their quarterback problems are without a solid quarterback, you're never going to consistently compete. The Vikings were in that same boat. I mean, this division has been a cakewalk for the Packers for years, especially with the elite level quarterbacking that they've gotten. Mike McCarthy didn't have to do shit to win that Super Bowl. And lucky for him, it's managed to extend his career into another franchise that he's going to do shit for again. Maybe Dak goes nuclear and they have a playoff run and whatever, but I'm with you. I mean, he's easily one of these retread guys that, like, that's most likely to finally be cut loose, right? Like if he goes, he's not sticking on as a coordinator somewhere, right? So I think this is his last straw, like his last chance here. And if he doesn't produce, it's it.
If he doesn't, I'm not even going to say make the playoffs. If he does not win that division with a 38-year-old Ryan Fitzpatrick, fumbleitis Daniel Jones, and a Jalen, it hurts to watch his game, then what faith do you have in this guy moving forward? And you can't waste those years with Dak.
Nope. Not with how much money he's making. You can't.
Exactly.
You gotta make
the
that
decisions
change.
are only going to get tougher. It's going to be harder to bolster that offensive line. Zeke's going to have to be cut in 2 years, most likely. Amari Cooper's not going to be there forever. Yes, CeeDee Lamb looked fantastic last year, but there's contracts, and basically this is how the league's set up, right? They're supposed to be cyclic, that you've got a window of opportunity, and that window of opportunity for the Dallas Cowboys is probably these next 2 years before it cycles back. And if you waste this year, then you've got to take your shot next year. And Mike McCarthy is not the one that should be at the helm if he doesn't prove it this year.
Nope. I'm with you 110% on that one. Okay, so we will wrap on that. Thanks for listening, as always, everybody. I do want to mention one thing before we go here. We tweeted something, or I tweeted something, shocker. I'm the guy behind the account, but tweeted something from the NPT Twitter account about Baker Mayfield. It was in response to a clip from Get Up where Dan Orlovsky was saying that Baker Mayfield resurrected the worst franchise in all of sports. I simply questioned, we're giving Baker all of the credit for the Browns turnaround, with a gif of Jim Carrey from Ace Ventura saying, "All righty then," mostly just because I watched that movie the other day, still holds up. And Browns fans are serious about Baker Mayfield, and apparently he is God up in Cleveland. I was not aware. So, Browns fans, I will state my position for the record here. It is not that I think Baker is bad. It's not that I think he doesn't deserve some credit for the turnaround, but he's just been okay. And I know that's triggering. That doesn't have to be an indictment on him as a player. It doesn't mean he's terrible. He turned it on last year. He seems to be going in the right direction, but they were under 500 2 years prior with him as a starter going into this season, and only took an 11-5 year, a really good run with a lot of talent around him, to get over the 500 mark as a starting quarterback. I don't think that just because what they had prior was so shitty for so long that Baker, you can point to him as being the sole reason for their comeuppance. That's just, I don't know. Maybe that's a hot take. Apparently, that's a hot take in Cleveland. But boy, was that aggressive.
I just don't get why you have to take anything away from Cleveland. They've already lost LeBron. They should have probably lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round of the playoffs last year. And this is from a guy that's not big on Pittsburgh, but the circumstances that led to them being up 28-0 were pretty unreal and quite frankly not all that related to Baker Mayfield. So I've got him again in the middle tiers. We both had him in the middle tiers of QB, and I think that that's where he ultimately belongs. But congratulations, Cleveland, on a playoff appearance. Enjoy watching it from your couch this year.
Yeah. I just think like, why is it so bad to say that Baker Mayfield is okay and deserves some credit? Like, if anything, I was trying to boost the Browns as an organization by saying they've actually got a lot going for them right now. They've got a good head coach. They've got a great guy running the show from a personnel standpoint. They've got an okay quarterback. They've got some good talent on that team.
They've got a great kicker in Kareem Hunt. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going for them right now.
Yeah. So anyway, Dog Pound, this is my somewhat apology. I hope that we can be friends in the future. But I don't know. I'm not going to change my stance on Baker until he forces me to. So for that, I'm sorry.